Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1156 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. I think that you can just tell that Oda had a lot of fun drawing this chapter. And really, I'm just thankful that this is definitely not a chapter that's going to take an hour to review. Praise Goda. But I don't want you to feel as if you're missing content this week because I have a video coming out probably Monday about Davy Jones that is going to be over an hour long. I just want to be upfront with you guys. This is one of the best theories I have ever made. I think that you're going to have a lot of fun watching it. So be hyped about that. But anyway, this chapter was all about the legends of what the narrator calls the Great Pirate Era. And for some reason, honestly, it's a question in and of itself. Oda began with the Kuja pirates. Now, I want it known, right, that One Piece can appeal to literally anybody of any age. But I think that Oda should be thankful that his primary audience is supposed to be young boys. And I think that the majority of his audience are men, period. Because Loki, I feel like a lot of women who would read this chapter might be offended. So we get to meet the current captain of the Kuja pirates, Gloriosa or Elder Nyan, during her glory days. And she is absolutely stunning. But yeah, you see how Oda decided to draw Elder Nyan in the present story, and then you compare it to how she looked back then. What happened? If it's not obvious, it should be. I really don't think that Oda is attracted to older women. But I really hope that not too many people out there took this too seriously, because remember, it's just a joke, I assume. Maybe? Oda has been on record more than once that his manga is intended to be read by young boys. So how do young boys see old women, right? They see him a lot like Elder Nyan regardless. And so I kind of think that that's what Oda is going for. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. And by the time that we're 80, we're all ugly regardless, so screw it. Youthfulness is an inherently attractive quality. Like our brains just know that means being healthy. Anyway, I apologize if you immediately unsubscribed. Really, don't blame you. It's just compulsive, man. I can't help it. Deep within my subconscious, there's like this thought of, oh no, potentially there's somebody out there somewhere that is going to be slightly irritated with One Piece. No, I should turn it off, but I can't. Honestly, I liked Gloriosa more than when we got to meet Shaki. Am I alone there or not? Honestly, and I may be stepping on some toes here, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Honestly, I kind of felt the same way with the introduction of Boa Hancock. Like Oda made this big deal about her being the most beautiful woman in the story or in the world. And I'm thinking to myself, like, there's at least 10 other women that I think are more attractive. And it's not just because Boa Hancock was kicking puppies, although it may have contributed. Man, guys, I suddenly feel like teching. Like, we rarely go down this rabbit hole. Let's linger, I guess. I'm curious, like, who everyone actually thinks is the best waifu in One Piece. And look, guys, if you go chalk and just pick Nami and Robin because they're part of the crew, just know, I'm judging you. Like, come on, let's be a little bit interesting here. But, and this is probably an important clarification, but don't be so interesting as to pick somebody like Shirahoshi on accident. She's technically 16. Also Rebecca too. Maybe a conversation for a different day, just like repeating over and over in my head, this is a manga made for young boys. Oda is writing for young boys. It's okay. But anyway, the irony of all of this is like, I'm asking myself this question as well, who is the best waifu? And the first thing that comes to mind is Monet. And I just made a spiel at the beginning of this video about physically altering your appearance. Maybe an exception for wings. I dig it. Also, for whatever reason, the long hair and glasses look just really works. Does that make me a nerd? But yeah, I've suddenly realized I'm married now, so abort ship. But yeah, anyway, besides this conversation about beauty, Oda is just very clearly anti-love. I'm kind of worried about the guy. Was he hurt as a child? Everyone has someone that they like, but no one that they like actually likes him back. Gloriosa has a thing for Roger, but Roger has a thing for Shaki. In fact, everyone has a thing for Shaki. Except for Rayleigh, but we know how that turns out. At the very least, there is definitely some philosophical conversation taking place here. It appears that in the spirit of One Piece, everybody wants something that they cannot actually obtain. Also, there's something to be said about equality and power. If you like your partner more than your partner likes you, that balance is off. It's also pretty brutal that Oda seems to be conveying here that the Kuja pirates win every battle with beauty alone. Have you considered that, power scalers? Maybe you should start power scaling beauty. Big Mom is narratively Yonko level, but she's actually a bit less than that because of the gains made from her 10 out of 10 beauty. Kaido was technically stronger confirmed. Maybe this is the real reason that Imu hides their appearance. Pulling out the trump card, whoop-bam. And a lot of you thought that Vivi was too weak to join the Straw Hats. I know it's been 25 years, but take your L. Really, this rabbit hole is endless. I mean, now we basically know why Zoro will surpass Mihawk. Those are sideburns that only a mother could love. And I suppose Perona as well. Maybe I'm memeing a bit hard today. But yeah, overall, I think I was a bit taken aback at how important the Kuja pirates actually were to this era, and I guess like multiple eras of piracy. But I found myself really liking it. You know, I don't know exactly where my opinion stands with everybody else, but Amazon Lily is one of my favorite arcs for sure. It's definitely one of the funniest One Piece arcs ever. But even as we were there and we learned that the Kuja pirates have history with other groups, I never really had the impression that they were that great. Even as Boa Hancock was a warlord, I suppose at that point in time, being a warlord had kind of lost a little bit of its shine because we'd already defeated so many of them. And then shortly after all of that, you got Marineford, where it's just like being a warlord. How important is that really? I guess in my brain, the goalposts had moved quite a bit because suddenly it's like, well, to be a person that really matters in the world, you need to be an admiral or a Yonko. All these other groups are lesser than. So I guess my takeaway from this is legitimately the beauty power scaling is a thing. Whether you want to consider it to be a meme or not, the Kuja pirates went head to head with the Roger pirates and won. That's basically what happened. Going back to how convoluted power scaling is, there's something to be said about the power of popularity in the pirate world. Obviously, if the Roger pirates had a legitimate reason to fight the Kuja pirates, like they were diametrically opposed, the Kuja pirates were evil or threatened their friends, something like that, then, you know, the Roger pirates would probably win. But lacking that, the Kuja pirates are just too damn innately likable. No one can give it their all against them. And also, this thought is kind of rattling around my brain, but as we get introduced to the Kuja pirates here, I can't help but have the impression that this was not only the glory days for Gloriosa and Shaki, but this was the glory days for the Kuja pirates, period. By the time that we get to the current story where Boa Hancock is the captain, the Kuja pirates have fallen quite a bit. And this may actually be something intentional on Oda's part. You know, because the Kuja pirates were so popular during this era, so influential, right? That makes them a threat. So in a similar but most likely lesser way, in the same way as the world government pursued Gold D. Rogers' child, it seems like perhaps the world government had it out for the Kuja pirates. The circumstances of this are still not entirely explained, but we do know that Boa Hancock ended up enslaved. There could be an actual story here. Like the world government had figured out or decided who was going to be the next all-star from Amazon Lily and plucked that flower. But yeah, I kind of led off with this question and I want to get back to it. Was anybody else just kind of confused and interested in why Oda decided to focus on the Kuja pirates so much? Like, we're talking about the Kuja pirates alongside names such as Rox D. Zebek and Gold D. Roger. Obviously, it's a joke, it's funny, and that is enough reason for Oda to include anything, but I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, you know, is there a larger narrative purpose for all of this? So personally, I like to connect this thought with the fact that we know that Shaki ultimately joins Rox D. Zebek. We might actually get that as this flashback continues. So we'll end up talking more about Rox D. Zebek in this review because a lot of this comes up, but I think the broad strokes of it is that Rox D. Zebek is very anti-government and is plotting a pirate revolution, like he's declaring war on the government. So in my opinion, this invites questions about Shaki. Did Shaki join Rox D. Zebek willingly? Did Shaki hear about what Rox D. Zebek was attempting to do and wanted in this? For me, that would be interesting because it would imply that Amazon Lily has some reason to want to take down the world government and not just be pirates for the gains of being a pirate. These two mindsets are distinctly different, if for no other reason than what Rox is doing is he's seeking revenge and seems to be recruiting people by and large that are down with it. I personally think that the vast majority of pirates are not looking to change the world, they're looking to take from the world as much as they can. And that just doesn't seem like Rox's crew's mindset. with some obvious exceptions. But it's also interesting that in this chapter we learn that Shaki is the vice captain of the Kuja pirates, Gloriosa is the captain, but Shaki eventually joins the Rocks pirates. So is there some kind of falling out there? Did Shaki do this against the wishes of her captain? We also see that Gloriosa is beginning to suffer from a love sickness, so this could also be important. Roger actually did defeat the Kuja pirates. This could also be like a crucial event in the eventual fall of the Kuja pirates themselves. Or to flip this in a different direction, we know that Rox D. Zebek recruited at least the majority of his crew utilizing Davy bag fights. So did the Kuja pirates challenge the Rocks pirates in a game like this for some reason, and did they just lose Shaki? I feel like we're speculating a lot of different directions, and I find myself doubting that we're actually going to get some kind of legitimate story here, so this may be all for naught sort of thing, but to me, it would just be interesting if, as an example, Gloriosa and Roger had an understanding that what Rox was doing, or what Rox was attempting to do, was perhaps not a good thing. Obviously, context is incredibly important, and we have none of it from Roger or Rox, but we do know that Roger either found himself or followed the Rocks pirates to God Valley and fought them there. So there is for sure a juicy story here. One that potentially a lot of fans are actually not prepared for because, as it seems to me, you know, what Rox is fighting for, the defeat of the world government, freeing slaves and all this, like there's a hunting game led by celestial dragons and God's knights in God Valley. Why would you fight Rox? But Roger must have had a reason. Anyway, if Gloriosa had an understanding of the relationship between Rox and Roger, and we're still not quite at the end of this story, right? So tension between the Roger pirates and the Rocks pirates could have increased. It could be true that Gloriosa sought out the Rocks pirates to attempt to defeat them in order to gain Roger's favor or his love, you know? But that turned out to be a very bad idea if it happened. I also feel as though there are unexplored layers in the Kuja pirates led by Boa Hancock eventually joining the world government, becoming their servants or warlords. One of Elder Nyan's defining characteristics in the Amazon Lily arc is she's kind of an advisor to Boa Hancock, and one of the things that she consistently advises is like, hey, you have responsibilities as a warlord of the sea, which you must fulfill. And to me, it kind of creates the impression that the Kuja pirates were defeated, really, by the world government. I mean, I think that it's fair to say that the Kuja pirates definitely were not free. And it's also interesting because a lot of the pirates end up gravitating towards Yonko, but the Kuja pirates, I guess, decided to pledge their loyalty to the world government pirate group instead. Which, ironically or not, is very similar to the dynamic of the Rocks pirates. You know, Rocks had a bunch of crew members that weren't necessarily loyal to him, and then the Kuja pirates and the world government, like, maybe there's something there. This could also have something to do with her love for Roger, and Roger also not fighting the world government. But at the end of the day, similar to the Rocks pirates, the Kuja pirates were effectively destined to one day stab their allies, the world government, in the back. But yeah, honestly guys, we're not done yet. I feel like I was not anticipating having this much to discuss about the Kuja pirates, but as I think about it, my mind starts racing. Another thing worthy of considering is that after Shaki joined the Rocks pirates, it doesn't appear as if she returned back to Amazon Lily. Now, this may be in part for love with Rayleigh, you know, but I also kind of wonder if she was embarrassed or, you know, something to that effect with what had happened. And even if this is not true, it seems pretty likely that as a member of the Rocks pirates, Shaki was a danger to her homeland. So maybe she felt like she could never return because, you know, that would make Amazon Lily even more of a target than it was. Honestly, for the notorious members of the Rocks pirates, survival after Rox's death really came down to how individually powerful you were. You have the formation of Yonko crews like Kaido and Big Mom, I think Shiki for a time as well. And the reason that they're safe is because they are so strong. But I don't quite get the same impression of Shaki, especially if she was going solo and didn't have the Kuja pirates as her allies. But even then, I really don't think that the Kuja pirates are to the same level. So really, Shaki was faced with perhaps one of two decisions. Either one, become a Yonko crew herself with the Kuja pirates, or ally herself with the Yonko for protection. And I guess she chose neither of these options and instead went into seclusion, went into hiding. But yeah, guys, I'm going to speculate something incredibly dark, but I think that this theory is, in the grand scheme of things, fairly likely at this time. Right now, I think that the vast majority of people, myself included, have a relatively positive impression of Rox D. Zebek. Is he perhaps doing the wrong things? Yes. I mean, I will always default to side with Roger. Roger fought Rox, therefore Roger was right and Rox was wrong. But it doesn't make me think that Rox is necessarily a bad person. And I think if there are things that scream to you like this is the bad thing that Rox is going to do, it's the idea that he most likely intends to kill all these celestial dragons, which I think is the wrong move. But it's also something that I feel as though I could understand. But yeah, once again, other than that, I think Rox is a somewhat likable guy for now. However, that could change. So I asked this question earlier. What is the grand scheme importance for the emphasis on the Kuja pirates? And the idea that seems most likely to me is right now, we do not know who Blackbeard's mother is. We do know, however, that Blackbeard is going to be conceived sometime relatively soon. So I'm just gonna wonder out loud if Shaki is actually Blackbeard's mother. And was this relationship consensual or not? Just something that has always kind of been in the back of my mind. Blackbeard is very ambitious and is willing to do a lot of bad things, but Blackbeard is also a character that you don't necessarily think of as truly despicable. But there's a very interesting scene following the war in Marineford where Blackbeard encounters Jewelry Bonnie, has her tied up, and offers for her freedom to become his woman. So I'm just gonna leave this out here. Either way, this story potentially works in more than one way, but if Shaki is Blackbeard's mother, it's very likely and practically confirmed that Shaki did not really have a role in Blackbeard's life. Again, context would be important, and we know essentially nothing, but my gut feeling, my knee-jerk is, I don't really feel like if Shaki, that we've met in the present story, has a child, that she has a lot of love for this child. In a way, it could potentially be paralleled with what we have gotten earlier in this flashback between Loki and Loki's mother. Blackbeard is also a cursed child. This thought would for sure make sense if the world government treated Rox's child in a way similar to how they treated Gold D. Rogers' child, right? They scoured the world for Ace. There was essentially no hope for Port-Goss D. Rouge to survive. So her child was an existential threat to her, which again should remind you of Loki's mother. If you are of the right mindset, you could perceive this as a curse. Rouge was cursed by Roger, or Rouge was cursed with Ace. But ultimately what ended up being the case is Rouge clearly didn't view it in that way because she loved her child, right? So whether or not the child doomed her, it didn't have that effect on her. In a way, Rouge would be paralleled with Hyrden's mother. And I think that this is insanely fitting for a member of the D clan, Port-Goss D. Rouge. They smile before they die, right? So she knew that she was going to die, and she smiled. She was not afraid of that fate. But it would make a lot of sense for Blackbeard's story to be the opposite. His existence was an existential threat to his mother, and obviously we don't know the story yet. We don't even know if Shaki is actually his mother, but if that is the case, then she chose to live. This could actually be noteworthy as one of the worst mother moments in the entirety of One Piece because it's like very intentionally pitted against, for instance, Bellemere from Nami's flashback, right? Like Bellemere would rather die than disown her children, or whatever the right word is for this. And Blackbeard grew up an orphan, absent love. But anyway, although the direction that this theory takes is quite dark, I also think that there's some philosophy about it that works. So you guys should already know when it comes to pirate stories or sailing stories, stumbling upon an island paradise and forming some kind of community is a pretty common trope. And so honestly, I think that where we are in the story and with piracy being huge to the culture of the entire world, that there are many islands which are effectively pirate paradises. So you could of course talk about Hachinosu, but I think that the island which emphasizes this most is Ivankov's Island. To me, it seems pretty telegraphed that Ivankov's Island did not really exist before Ivankov. Ivankov found the island, became its queen, and has sort of recruited like-minded people of the sea to join them there. So it is a literal pirate paradise for cross-dressers who feel alienated by the rest of the world. A place where they feel like they can be free. And so thinking about it in this way, I think that Amazon Lily strikes me as another version of the same thing. Why is there a random island in the world where only women can live there and men are illegal? To me, it is a pirate paradise for women where women can feel free. And obviously this is speculation, but I think that it holds a lot of merit. I think whoever founded Amazon Lily was likely persecuted by men. Persecuted may not be the right word, but I'm sure that you could imagine. So you have kind of a theme for the paradise of Amazon Lily, and then Oda includes little details within the stories of the people from Amazon Lily which relate to it, such as Boa Hancock being enslaved, and everything that she was forced to do while that was the case. So with that in mind, for Shaki to have a story which might in some ways relate to this actually makes a lot of sense. Because this is precisely the reason that Amazon Lily has the ideals that it has, why the island represents what it does. But yeah, while we're talking about Boa Hancock and we're talking about lineage, I've seen this already just plastered everywhere on social media, so I think that people already got it, but it seems pretty likely to me as well that in this chapter we met Luffy's biological mother. Her name was Tritoma, and she was the Empress of Amazon Lily before Boa Hancock. But yeah, I'm really sorry if this makes you uncomfortable, but I think that this story is very related to the things that we have already discussed, because we already have essentially what happened to Boa Hancock. Boa Hancock was born in Amazon Lily. She was a member of the Kuja pirates at 12 years old, and then we already know that the Empress of Amazon Lily is also the captain of the Kuja pirates, so Tritoma was the captain at the time. We know that the Kuja pirates were defeated by slavers when Boa Hancock was 12. So rough timelines here, but Tritoma was likely sold into slavery 22 years ago. But yeah, obviously for this woman to be Luffy's biological mother, you need some way for her to form a relationship with Dragon. And her being a slave is like pretty justified. Because at this time in the story, Dragon was already known as a freedom fighter. I'm not sure if he was necessarily revolutionary yet, but freedom fighter. Tritoma was a slave. He was most likely trying to free people. This is how you potentially meet. And just look at her, man. I mean, come on. There's like clearly some Luffy-esque features there. But yeah, I presume that there's more to this story. I'm so excited for a full Dragon flashback, but I'm of the opinion that Tritoma, for some reason, died. It would certainly explain the expression on Dragon's face in present story. Like, that dude is not happy, you know? So it's kind of how I see what happened, but the actual, you know, I can't wait to see it. But yeah, once again, to go back to the question of why Oda decided to focus on the Kuja pirates, I think that at the conclusion of this discussion, he had every reason to emphasize the Kuja pirates because they are central to all love stories that matter, it seems like. Also, I don't know if this hit anyone else, but if this theory is true, and I really do think that it is, take yourself back to Amazon Lily, where Boa Hancock was explaining her story to Luffy. Suddenly, that hits you a bit different, doesn't it? Like, Luffy didn't realize it at the time, but I mean, Boa Hancock may have been telling Luffy the story of his own mother. Peak One Piece. Also, Luffy definitely has some Amazonian in his bloodline. I mean, look at the way that that dude acts. And I am totally 100% prepared to cry. And I hope Oda does this. I feel like there's no reason not to, so it has to happen. When Oda eventually reveals the identity of Luffy's biological mother to the people of Amazon Lily, I would cry. They really are family. I also wonder if Kuma perhaps knew. Remember, Kuma was a part of the freedom fighters in the Revolutionary Army with Dragon, around the same time that Dragon would have met Tritoma. So given this theory, Kuma literally sent Luffy home. Honestly, I may just start crying right now. Kuma is the absolute best dad. And what's even crazier about all this is even though Luffy grew up without his mother, this is actually the common practice of the women of Amazon Lily. Like if they have a child who is a son, right, the son can't live in Amazon Lily. So this all kind of worked out as it would have been anyway. I am just thankful that it is very unlikely for Boa Hancock to literally be Luffy's sister because reading enough manga, like, that was a thought that occurred to me. But nah, I'm pretty sure crisis averted. You know, the theory for a while that I actually really liked is that Luffy's mother perhaps was a celestial dragon. But given this and the likelihood of it, and me really sitting down and thinking about it, I really like that Luffy's mother is potentially actually a pirate. There's something fitting about that. Piracy is literally in his blood. So what he came to become is pretty well fated. But anyway, to continue in the chapter, we got some absolute fan service of Garp and Roger and all of this, man. You know, you don't have to talk too much about it. You don't have to think too much about it. It's just such a joy to read. I really like this dynamic with Roger that for the most part, he's a rational pirate captain. And so the Marines and the Navy are coming to capture him. So he's like, all right, let's go. And then they're like, wait, it's Garp. And he's like, hold on, never mind. Absolute peak rivalry. And it also gets me somewhat excited to explore this relationship more because we're getting a little snapshot here. But obviously there are many events that happened before this. And this is another story I really want Oda to flesh out in full. And I think a lot of you guys will know that I have a theory that a lot of you liked, that Garp and Roger were actually brothers, maybe not literally biologically, but were brothers as children who chose different fates. And this theory also included Rock's D. Zebek, so it was like your Ace, Sabo, Luffy triumvirate. I don't know if it's wishful thinking, but a lot of what we're getting in this chapter makes me feel like that theory might have been on the right track. It's like this universe where Ace, Sabo, and Luffy all pursued their own fates. They grew up into adulthood and managed to become the legends of their era, all of them. And given what we speculated here, all of this intersects with these families inevitably finding the Island of Women. Also, I realize I didn't say this before, and I'm not going to go back and cut this in, but Blackbeard's name is Marshall D. Teach. So for Shaki to be his mother, she would need to be Marshall D. Shaki. Oda doesn't actually give us her surname in this chapter, so such a thing is possible. Although I'm still really curious why Blackbeard doesn't go by Rox D. Teach. But really, to throw a random idea out into the ether, I don't know if it makes the most sense to me for Blackbeard to be exactly the same as Ace and take the name of his mother and not his father. I mean, maybe that works, but there's a part of me that's like, you know, why would Blackbeard name himself after a mother that I don't actually think cared much about him? So it's potentially interesting to me that the name Marshall is a lawman. That's literally what this word means. I don't know exactly why, and I may be reaching for the stars here, but some of this reminds me of Game of Thrones, right? Like one of the main characters in Game of Thrones is Jon Snow, and the last name Snow is given to bastards, essentially. It's not a real last name, it's a generic last name given to people who don't deserve to have a real surname. So Marshall could end up being something very similar to this. Essentially, this is the last name the world government gave Blackbeard after they captured him as a baby. If the story actually played out like this, I realize I'm now just throwing headcanon, totally unjustified headcanon at you, but I kind of think that happened, so these thoughts work well together for me. This child is the property of the world government, a literal bastard of the law. Although, believe me, I do realize that Oda most likely read Game of Thrones after Blackbeard, Marshall D. Teach, was named, so this would just be a pleasant coincidence, a sort of retcon, sort of, if true. But another interesting thought that wouldn't be a retcon at all is that this is some hint towards Blackbeard's family's legacy. That Blackbeard and his family, this could even potentially relate to a character like Rox, have history as being lawmen. I don't think that this is quite as crazy as many of you might believe. You know, you have already Monkey D. Garp, who is literally a vice admiral. He's literally a lawman, and this is the Monkey D family. Oda parallels a lot of things constantly in all sorts of creative ways, so this could work. But anyway, this all really did begin as a Herald flashback, so there's a tiny part of this chapter which takes us back to Elbaf and King Harold. Oda is developing the rivalry between Hyruden and Loki. It's fantastic. He's developing the character of Loki, who does not feel as though he's loved, likely due to his mother. While there are characters such as Hyruden's mother and Harold himself who are trying to convince him otherwise, he just refuses to believe. Our guy Loki is very stubborn, literally making conspiracy theories in real time to try to justify his worldview, his mindset. It almost pains me of how real this is. Like, people do this. I, of course, have never been guilty. Never. But yeah, let it be known that Oda is continuing to parallel and contrast Loki and Luffy. You know, like Loki's mindset as he attempts to leave Elbaf is very similar to a character like Sabo rather than Luffy. He's like, I hate you people, I'm ready to go leave. And at the same time, there's a lot of similarity here with Luffy if he gets on a boat, but he doesn't have the skills to actually be able to sail. So yeah, I know that I say this a lot, and I know that at this point in time, most of you understand it, but this is how Oda writes a lot of One Piece, is he takes the very same idea for different characters and just mixes it in different ways. Important to Luffy's flashback as a child is his relationship with his siblings, his brothers, Ace and Sabo. This is also important to Loki's flashback, but they're not friends, and that matters, that makes a difference. Just know that Loki and Luffy actually want the same thing. It's actually kind of sad. Luffy wants friends, that's obvious from the entirety of the story, but Loki wants friends as well. The difference between the two is that Luffy pursues friendship while Loki devises reasons not to. But yeah, another thing that is important in Loki's flashback is the relationship of a mother, not necessarily his biological mother, but a mother who adopts him. This isn't actually as much clear from Luffy's flashback, but in retrospect, also given a lot of this conversation here today, it's very important that Dadan was Luffy's actual mother. She was the one that loved him and raised him, and Luffy accepted this love while Loki rejected it. Same story, different result. So when that random fisherman who saved Loki tells us that Loki has a shit attitude, that is what he means. And I think that, you know, he's right. There's some amount of enabling going on here as well. We talked about enabling a lot when it came to Big Mom, but everyone in Big Mom's life was afraid to discipline her, was afraid to parent her because they were afraid of her. With Loki, I think Loki badly needs some parenting, and it doesn't seem like Harold is willing to do that, and Harold is the guy I feel as though Loki would listen to most. So because of how detached Harold was, I think he also played a pivotal role in making Loki who he was, which is also sad. So I'm sure that you guys can already see it, but there's more parallels here between Loki and Luffy. Who was Luffy's father? Who played the father role in Luffy's life? Well, that was Garp. And Garp, just the same as Harold, was very busy and often away. The difference between the two, and there could be so many layers here. I feel like there are so many layers here. Maybe Harold regretted a lot of what happened or regretted being away from Loki all the time. He was just full of compassion. But when he came home, he wanted to love his child. When Garp came home, he wanted to discipline Luffy and make sure that he grew up right. Guys, Oda is saying something. I almost don't want to spell it out because it's pretty controversial given the current climate. But I do tend to agree that love is not the only thing that a child needs. And while many people will absolutely tell you that their life experience, they had terrible experiences regarding this, I do also tend to think that disciplining a child can also be another form of love. At least if the intentions are pure. At the very least, it shows that you care. I say this from time to time in much different circumstances, but I think it bears repeating. I think that a lot of people just really need to understand this. The absolute vast majority of people, 99.9% of them, do not want to be the bad guy. It can be argued that this is a responsibility or a burden you accept due to love. But anyway, just some food for thought. I realize that it's because I get preachy like this, or that we discuss these highly contested philosophies, that a lot of people stop watching me or unsubscribe or whatever. Their ideals or ideologies are threatened, and I could choose not to do that, but I like exploring ideas. At the very least, if your worldview is threatened, it provides you opportunity to hockey up, and eventually the truth will win. But meanwhile, as we are paralleling Luffy's backstory with Loki's backstory, we get to Rock's, and it's here that parallels are necessary for Rock's adventure and Luffy's adventure, and you can tackle this in exactly the same way. We can see as Rock's infamy and fame grew that he started to attract other strong pirates, and the crew just seems to be amplifying exponentially. This very same thing is happening with Luffy, but obviously in an entirely different way. Like the glue that holds the Straw Hat Pirates and the Straw Hat Grand Fleet together, and how Luffy makes friends with all of these people is by shared compassion, right? They all have trials together in order to save people or save their friends. It's about the pursuit of freedom on a very human level. Whereas I feel like the Rock's pirates are defined similar to Goldie Roger's speech when he inspired the great age of the golden age of piracy, is wealth, fame, and power. These were the things that drew people to Rock's. Also, it appears revenge. The very clear subtext of all of this is that Rock's is going about it the wrong way. But at the same time, what Rock's is achieving is very much possible. I mean, hell, guys, we see this in the real world. I hate to spoon feed you guys some of my pessimistic worldview, but if you think about like the government, actual government, as a large pirate crew, the people that are recruited to the government's crew, by and large, are not actually looking to help people for compassionate reasons. They are there in the pursuit of wealth, fame, and power. There's also an incredible irony in all of this because Rock's objective is to take down the world government in the story of One Piece, but his crew kind of represents that, does it not? So you can circle all of these people as most likely the ones that you should follow least, deserving of your faith and trust least. Also, I'm sure that Oda will eventually explain to us how the Rock's pirates fell apart due to infighting, constant backstabbing, and that is politics in a nutshell, right? By and large, vile people, or at the very least, an extremely vile culture. But anyway, there are some really important things to discuss from Rock's and his crew on Hachinosu. Rock's tells us almost verbatim that there are 2 devil fruits he's after, and he tells us that one of them is most likely on Elbaf, and it'll only show its true power if Harold eats it. Guys, I'm not going to linger on this. We've already speculated this. I think that this was pretty close to being a community theory. The devil fruit, the legendary devil fruit passed down in the country of Elbaf, is almost guaranteed to be the Gomu Gomu no Mi. And this integrates somehow, some way with Shanks obtaining it and Luffy eventually eating it. So did Loki consume the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf? Did he take it from his father Harold? That was some of the things that we were saying earlier on in Elbaf. No, I don't think so, because I think it's literally the Gomu Gomu no Mi. But that does not mean that there might be some other powerful fruits that exist in the country of Elbaf for Loki to possess. It's just the legendary one that everyone hyped up as Gomu Gomu no Mi, which makes a ton of sense given Nika, like that makes sense. At the same time, I kind of hate being so narrow-minded, and I can be narrow-minded sometimes, but does it have to be the Nika fruit? Is it possible that the legendary devil fruit is something else? Think, as an example, the Gura Gura no Mi, which we know that Blackbeard possessed. Like, a part of this conversation, Rock's wanted 2 devil fruit. Blackbeard was very selective about the fruits that he wanted. He ended up choosing the Gura Gura no Mi, so that could also end up being the fruit that Rock's wanted. So you could imagine that a giant the size of Harold possessing the Gura Gura no Mi might unlock the true potential of that fruit. So does it have to be the Nika fruit? Absolutely have to? No. I just think that Nika and Gomu Gomu no Mi makes too much sense. So I'm not gonna bother to pursue that conversation. But if I'm wrong, I'm not gonna rage about it so long as it makes sense. I'll just say that I will be at least a little bit shocked if it's not the Gomu Gomu no Mi. And Harold having the unique ability to awaken the Gomu Gomu no Mi is something that intuitively makes sense to me because he's full of compassion. And at the same time, if you want to assume this to be true, and I do want to assume this to be true, this could tell you a little bit something about the circumstances required to awaken Luffy's fruit. And we've said this a lot in various videos throughout the year, but I kind of do think that the Nika fruit, which the Nika is the sound of a smile, this is a fruit which is heavily related to love. Just know that smiling or joy is something that's heavily associated with love. And that is the central personality trait of Luffy's devil fruit. So for now, I think I'm of the opinion that the circumstances required to awaken the Gomu Gomu no Mi is, firstly, I think you do have to die. But I think more than anything, you have to be overcome with a profound desire or will to save the ones that you love. Or I suppose free them. Possessing a profound ability to love matters. So as Luffy was dying, he had this, and that is what allowed him to awaken the fruit. And why Rox believes that Harold is the perfect candidate to possess his fruit, because he could eventually unlock its true power. But yeah, probably even more interesting than this, which is a feat by itself, is what is the identity of the second fruit that Rox desires. Most likely the one that Rox intended to eat himself. Also, as a side note, this also seems to confirm that Rox probably did not have the ability to consume more than one devil fruit like his son Blackbeard, so I don't think that that's a genetic trait. But yeah, I suppose the real easy answer here is the Yami Yami no Mi, because Blackbeard, that was the fruit that he decided he required before even beginning his real adventure in pursuit of power. By far, guys, this is the most likely theory. But similar to what we said before, it doesn't have to be the case, and I find myself more willing to discuss this than the Nika fruit for whatever reason, but Rox could desire Emu's fruit. That would make a lot of sense to me. Or potentially something else. We do know that this story eventually leads to God Valley, and we know for sure one of the fruit that were present there that it seems like was the Rox Pirate's objective was the Dragon Devil fruit that Kaido eventually ate. So, I mean, if this story is continuous and Rox circled this fruit, then finding its location led to God Valley, and so maybe it's the dragon fruit. I've speculated about dragons for an eternity, and it has so far never really paid off, but I mean, dragons do seem very important to me in the story, and even in Elbaf recently, we got the mural, and on top of Treasure Tree Adam in the mural, there is a dragon. So, this could also make some sense. And if this is true, it would also sort of separate Blackbeard from Rox. Like, perhaps they wanted different things or had a different view on what should happen. But yeah, just a thought to throw out to you guys. We know for a fact that Rox Diesebek desires becoming king of the world. And in the mural in Elbaf, it paints a picture of a dragon ruling over the world tree. So maybe Rox believes that the king of the world should be a dragon. And another thing that I want to say, I have a theory, I'll link it in the description, that I really like. I still like to this day and is only gaining support. But the idea essentially is that Blackbeard desires to become Nika, the destructive version of Nika, which is really interesting given this chapter because Rox seems to believe that he would be unable to awaken the Gomu Gomu no Mi, if that is the fruit that he's referring to from Elbaf. But if you assume this to be true, then that's interesting because Rox wants Harold to become Nika. And we haven't even talked about this at all, but Rox knows way too much, and I'm really curious how he knows what he knows, but I assume that he knows that this fruit in Elbaf, the reason why it's so desirable is it, once awakened, makes you Nika. So we are balls deep in the rabbit hole right now, making assumptions left and right, bear that in mind, but it's an interesting thought that Rox perhaps does not believe that the person destined to become Nika is also destined to become king of the world. These are two separate roles. But yeah, I may just skip the context and just tell you guys what I think. And maybe you'll make some sense of it, but I'm starting to have the opinion that Rox is trying to fulfill the prophecies that he is somehow aware of. And I think that these prophecies, what they tell you, what Rox definitively knows, is that there's an important story between two brothers who are on the same crew. This is why he wants Harold to become part of his crew. One of these brothers ends up consuming the Gomu Gomu no Mi and becomes Nika. The other brother consumes a different fruit and becomes his opposing force. These two characters must duke it out. One must kill the other for the world to flip upside down and change. So when talking about Luffy and Blackbeard, it is not quite so straightforward this is the case. I think that this may be more so the history than the present, although lineage obviously matters a lot. I hope you guys are following me. I'm saying things that make sense if you really think about it. But at the end of the day, right, we know that Luffy is probably going to fight Blackbeard, and between the two, whoever wins ends up becoming the person that changes the world. One of these is desirable, one of these less so. So we talked about this concept a lot when it came to Kaido. Like Kaido believed in Nika and wanted this person to appear, and then stopped believing that Nika would ever appear, and then finally decided, look, I'm going to become Nika, even though it's sad that this means that I'm going to destroy the world. The world simply needs to change. In a very similar way, I see Rock setting up the circumstances for him to become sort of Blackbeard-like character, and also trying to create his opposing force so that this destined battle can take place and the world can be allowed to change, whatever the outcome. This kind of thought actually works incredibly well if you consider Rocks to be an intelligent person. He should understand everyone's saying it, like this crew is destined to fracture, right? They're destined to stab each other in the back. But that is perhaps something that Rocks is actually counting on. So Harold could have been the final piece to this puzzle, and it ended up being a big deal that Harold never joined the crew and never consumed the fruit. So in a very similar way as Roger, Rocks was fighting against destiny or fate. He was simply born too soon. And I think that this is something that Roger definitively learned when he learned that the ancient weapon Poseidon was not yet born. And this relates to some of the things talked about in this chapter because they start talking about the Galley Raw giant pirates. We know that they possess the blueprints to create Pluton, so I think that they're talking about collecting the ancient weapons, which is another thing which makes a ton of sense. Because as an example, in Wano, Big Mom and Kaido are talking about possessing or acquiring the ancient weapons. I think they learned that from Rocks. Like, again, how did Rocks know everything that he knew? But yeah, the ancient weapons are a part of this destiny as well. But yeah, I guess I do really want to linger on this question. How did Rocks know all of these secrets? Another thing that this chapter highlights is the way that Roger learned the truth of the world is by adventuring the world, visiting all the islands. He mastered the seas, and that allowed him to find Laugh-Tale and all the clues needed to put the puzzle together. But the Rocks pirates don't operate in the same way. Rocks does not operate in the same way. They even talk about, like, we have no idea where there are frozen giants. And from the present story, like this, how Luffy was able to find these people, although he wasn't aware of it at the time, is same as Roger, by adventuring. So on one hand, I have a suspicion that part of the way that Rocks gathers intelligence is by meeting people from various parts of the world. The Rocks pirates are doing something similar as the Strat pirates. They're from all different parts of the world where they met all sorts of different people. So through this web of connections, that allows Rocks access to potentially a lot of information without the necessity to adventure the world in the same way as Roger and Luffy. Like, I guess what I'm saying is the collective adventuring of the Rocks pirates is immense, although they did not do that together. And Big Mom may even allude to this at least somewhat in the chapter because she talks about, her intelligence gathering. She acquires intel or information not necessarily by traveling to islands herself, but through her subordinates. In present time, this is both her homies and her children, but at this time, it's mostly her homies. But yeah, this was mentioned to me, and I want to share it with you because it's just a different way of thinking about it. But it's also possible that Rocks is simply from a family or from an island that has more information or knowledge than other places. Like, basically, the idea is that Rocks is from Laugh-Tale, or Rocks was born in Lodestar. I also find myself liking the thought that Rocks might actually be a celestial dragon. Either way, just some food for thought. I suppose that the way that Oda has decided to draw Rocks, the highlights in his hair, the dual black and white, I think that that is symbolic. Could also relate to his lineage. But I'm assuming that Rocks' hair is black and white. That doesn't have to be the case. It could also be black and blonde. And blonde is a color that we would associate with royalty. So I suppose I'm saying that it wouldn't shock me if Rocks was a bastard child of a celestial dragon and has dynamics that might involve himself in some facets with the world government while not necessarily being a true part of the celestial dragon culture. But yeah, it should go without saying that the Rocks pirates remain incredibly interesting. Everything that is happening is absolute insanity, its peak, and I'm enjoying every moment of it. But as fate would have it, I said at the beginning of this video, wow, this is finally a chapter that I don't feel like I need to take an hour to review. And here we are. As always, I'm curious as to what you think, whether you noticed something from the chapter that I might have missed. Just share your thoughts. If you're interested, check out my book, The Booms. Link is in the description. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.